I want you to imagine standing at your front door at 2 in the morning, rain coming down so hard you can barely see past your porch light, and there's a girl on your doorstep. She couldn't have been more than 16 years old, soaking wet, shaking like a leaf, and her belly. She was clearly pregnant, maybe 7 or 8 months along. And the first thing she said to me, through chattering teeth and tears streaming down her face, wasn't "help me" or "please" or even her name. She looked up at me with these hollow, exhausted eyes and said, "I have nowhere else to go. I saw your light on. That was it. That was the moment that changed my entire life. And I need you to tell me, would you have let her in?" Because what I decided to do that night set off a chain of events that I never could have predicted. And years later, when she came back to my door with a secret that shook me to my core, I understood for the first time why some moments in your life are not accidents. They are appointments. My name is Daniel, and at the time this story begins, I was 34 years old, a single father raising my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, in a small house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood in rural Ohio. I want to paint you a picture of my life back then so you understand exactly the kind of man I was and the kind of situation I was living in, because context matters here. 3 years before that rainy night, my wife, Caroline, had passed away from an aggressive form of ovarian cancer. She was diagnosed in February and gone by October of that same year. 8 months. That's all the time we had between hearing the word cancer and standing at her graveside. Lily was 5 when her mother died, and I was left holding the pieces of a life I had no idea how to reassemble. I had a mortgage, a kindergartner who cried for her mom every single night, a full-time job as a high school history teacher, and a grief so heavy it felt like wearing a coat made of concrete every single day. I was not thriving, I was surviving. There is a profound difference between those two things, and anyone who has lost a spouse while raising a young child alone knows exactly what I mean. But we were managing. Lily was a light in a very dark time. She had her mother's laugh, and her mother's stubbornness, and her mother's way of tilting her head when she was thinking hard about something, and every single one of those things broke my heart and healed it at the same time. We had a routine. We had each other. And slowly, painfully, we were finding our footing. I had a small support system, my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, a 70-year-old widow who adored Lily and watched her on the evenings when I had parent-teacher conferences or needed to run errands. My sister, Renee, called every Sunday without fail. And I had my students, 50-plus teenagers every year, who reminded me that life, no matter how messy and unfair, was still worth showing up for. So that was me. A grieving widower, a devoted father, a teacher who genuinely cared. A man who lived quietly, kept to himself mostly, and tried every single day to do right by his daughter and honor the memory of the woman he had loved with everything he had. That was the man standing at the door at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday in November when the storm hit and a pregnant teenage girl appeared on my porch, like something out of a dream. Or maybe a test. Her name was Maya. She told me that after I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and guided her to the couch and put a kettle on for tea. Maya Reyes. She was 17, not 16 as I'd guessed, a junior at a high school in the next town over. She had dark hair plastered to her face and dark eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. As the warmth of the house began to thaw her out, the story came tumbling out in fragments, the way stories do when someone has been holding them in for too long and suddenly feels just safe enough to let go. Maya had been living with her aunt after her mother, a single parent herself, had passed away 2 years prior. Her father had never been in the picture. The aunt, a woman named Darlene, had taken her in out of obligation rather than love. Maya made that very clear, and not with bitterness, just with the flat certainty of someone who had accepted a hard truth a long time ago. When Maya discovered she was pregnant at 16, Darlene's response had been volcanic. There were screaming matches, ultimatums, and finally, 3 weeks before that stormy night, Darlene had told Maya to get out. She had packed a single bag and been bouncing between the couches of school friends. But one by one, those options had dried up. Parents got involved, people got uncomfortable, and Maya found herself with nowhere left to go. She had been walking for hours in the rain that night. She told me, with no destination in mind, and she had seen the warm glow of my living room light through the trees and followed it like a moth. I sat across from her on the armchair Caroline used to love, the one by the window, and I listened to every word. And when she was done, I looked at this exhausted, frightened, profoundly alone young woman. And I thought about Lily asleep upstairs, and I thought about Caroline, and I thought about every student I had ever taught who came to school carrying weights that no teenager should have to carry. And I made a decision that I knew people would question. I told Maya she could stay. Not forever, I clarified, not without conditions. We would figure out next steps in the morning. Social services, resources, options. But she was not going back out into that storm, and she was not going to sleep on the street while she was carrying a child. That was simply not something I was capable of allowing. The next morning I called Renee first, and God bless my sister, because after about 45 seconds of shocked silence her response was, "Okay. What do you need?" I called the school district's social worker, a woman I knew professionally named Gail Hendricks, who was practical and compassionate, and helped me understand exactly what the legal and ethical framework looked like for someone in my position taking in a minor. There were forms, there were calls to the county, there were conversations with people who had titles I had to write down to remember. It was complicated and it was slow, but within 2 weeks, we had a temporary guardianship arrangement in place that made Maya's presence in my home official and above board. Darlene signed off without much resistance. I think she was relieved. Lily's reaction was something I had braced myself for, prepared speeches for, worried about for days. And my daughter, 8 years old and wiser than most adults I knew, looked at Maya's round belly at the breakfast table on the third morning and said, "Does the baby have a name yet?" And that was that. Lily decided immediately that Maya was family, and Lily's certainty had a way of making things true. Within a week, Maya was helping Lily with her reading homework in the evenings, and Lily was showing Maya her collection of drawings, and there was a warmth in my house that had been missing for 3 years. It terrified me how quickly it felt natural. Maya was remarkable. That is the only word. She was smart in the way that people become when they have had to rely entirely on their own mind to navigate the world. She was funny in a dry, quiet way that snuck up on you. She was fiercely proud, which meant that accepting help was genuinely difficult for her. And I learned quickly that the way to make her comfortable was to frame things as exchanges rather than charity. She helped with dinner. She helped with household tasks. She tutored Lily in reading and in the basics of Spanish, which Maya spoke fluently from her mother. In exchange, I made sure she had prenatal appointments, healthy food, a warm bed, and a safe place to do the homework from her own school that she was determined to keep up with even as her due date approached. On January 19th, at 6:42 in the morning, Maya gave birth to a baby girl at the county hospital. I was in the waiting room with Lily, who had been absolutely insistent on coming, and who fell asleep in the plastic chair with her head on my arm around 5 a.m. Maya had no one else. Her chosen name for the baby was Sofia Elena Reyes, and when the nurse brought me in and I saw Maya holding that tiny, impossibly perfect baby with tears rolling down her face, and a smile that transformed her entire face into something luminous, I had to look away for a moment because my own eyes had filled up and I was trying very hard to hold it together. We brought Sofia home to my house, and here is where I want to pause. Because I know what some of you are thinking. I know some people thought I had lost my mind. My colleagues raised eyebrows. Some of the parents at Lily's school had opinions that made their way back to me through the relentless social network of a small community. A single man, a widower, taking in a teenage girl and her newborn baby. People are always going to construct a narrative that makes them comfortable, and sometimes that narrative is ugly. I want to be straightforward with you. There was nothing inappropriate about my motivations, and anyone who knew me and chose to look honestly at the situation rather than speculate knew that. Renee came and stayed for the first 2 weeks after Sofia was born, which helped practically and also, I think, helped quiet some of the whispers because she was vocal and unapologetic in her support of what we were doing. So here is the situation I was in. I had become, in the span of about 3 months, the de facto family of a teenage mother and her newborn daughter, in addition to raising my own child, while working full-time and managing my own still very raw grief. And I had to make a choice about whether to lean into this or to start drawing back, to begin the process of transitioning Maya to a more independent situation. I want you to pause before I tell you what happened next, because I genuinely want to know what you would have done. Drop it in the comments. Would you have started creating distance? Would you have helped her find her own place, her own footing, faster? Or would you have done what I did? Because I think the answer says a lot about who we are. What I did was stay in it. I didn't pull back. I helped Maya enroll in a program for young parents that allowed her to finish high school while receiving childcare support. I helped her apply for every assistance program she qualified for. I converted the small spare room into something that worked for both her and Sophia. I treated her like a member of the household, with responsibilities and respect and the expectation that she would build something for herself and for her daughter, and she did. Maya Reyes was not someone you had to push. You just had to clear the obstacles and then get out of the way and watch. She graduated high school on time, with her class, and sat in that gymnasium in her cap and gown with Sophia, in a little yellow dress on my lap 3 rows back, and Lily beside me holding a handmade sign that said, "Go Maya," in glitter letters that got absolutely everywhere. She lived with us for 2 more years after that. She took community college courses, worked part-time at a local clinic as a front desk receptionist, saved money with a discipline that impressed me daily, and was an incredible mother to Sophia. When she finally moved into her own apartment, a small but bright 2-bedroom about 20 minutes away, it was bittersweet in the way that all right endings are. Lily cried. I'm not going to pretend I didn't have a lump in my throat the size of a fist, but it was right. It was exactly what it was supposed to look like. Maya hugged me on the doorstep of that apartment and said, "I don't know how to thank you for what you did." And I told her the truth, which was that she had given us as much as we had given her. Then she bundled Sophia into the car and drove to her new life. We stayed in touch. Holidays, birthdays, the occasional Sunday dinner when schedules allowed. Lily and Sophia had a bond that I can only describe as sisters who chose each other, and watching those two grow up side by side, even from a distance, was one of the quiet joys of my life through Lily's middle school and high school years. Maya finished her associate's degree, then transferred to a state university on a scholarship. She studied social work. I cried when she told me, though I waited until after the phone call to do it. Years passed. Lily went to college in Pennsylvania. I rattled around my house a little, found new rhythms, threw myself into my teaching. And then one afternoon in October, 12 years after that stormy night, there was a knock at my door. It was Maya. She was 30 now, poised and professional, and still carrying that same quiet intensity in her eyes. Sophia, now 12, was beside her, tall and dark-eyed and looking at the house with open curiosity. I hugged them both, and brought them inside and made coffee, and we sat in the kitchen, and Maya wrapped her hands around her mug the same way she always had, and she looked at me and said, "I need to tell you something. I've been trying to figure out how to say it for a long time." The secret she had been carrying was this. In the months before she found my porch that night, at her lowest point, Maya had made a plan that she had never told another living soul. She had decided that if she could not find safety and stability, she was not going to bring her daughter into the world. She had been walking that night, not just without a destination, but with the specific and terrifying intention of ending her own life. She had chosen the storm because she thought it would look like an accident. And then she had seen my light. The room was completely silent when she finished telling me. I could hear the clock on the wall. I could hear my own heartbeat. Maya was watching me with steady eyes, not crying, because she had long since processed this and made her peace with it, but needing me to know. Needing me to understand the full weight of what that open door had meant. I reached across the table and covered her hands with mine, and I could not speak for a moment. And then I did the only thing I could think to do, which was to tell her that I was so grateful, more grateful than I had words for, that she had followed the light. That she was here. That Sophia was here. that the world was immeasurably better for containing both of them in it. Sophia, who knew the broad outlines of her mother's story but not all of it, had reached over and taken her mother's arm, and the three of us sat in that kitchen in the October afternoon light, and just let the enormity of it settle around us. Maya told me she had become a social worker specifically to be, for others, what I had accidentally been for her that night. A light in the storm. A door that opened. She was working with at-risk youth, with young mothers, with teenagers aging out of the foster system. She was extraordinary at it, she told me without any vanity, just fact, because she understood from the inside what those kids needed, and she refused to let bureaucracy and limitation stop her from providing it when it was in her power to do so. She had driven 4 hours to tell me this in person, because she felt I deserved to understand the full story of what I had participated in without knowing it. Before they left that evening, Sophia turned to me in the doorway and said, with a 13-year-old's directness, "Mom says you saved her life. I just wanted to say thank you for that. Because I really like being alive." And I had to close the door fairly quickly after they drove away because I was not going to stand on the porch and weep in front of the neighbors. Here is what I have carried with me since that afternoon. We never know what our small acts of decency and basic human compassion are actually doing. We never know what our open door or our warm light or our willingness to simply listen and not turn away is preventing or enabling or creating. I did not think I was saving anyone that night. I thought I was doing the only reasonable thing in front of me. But sometimes the only reasonable thing is everything. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness is the exact thing that tips the balance of an entire life, and by extension, every life that life will touch. I am a better man for knowing Maya Reyes. Lily is a better person for growing up alongside Sophia. And I genuinely believe that the world contains ripples from that night that none of us will ever fully be able to trace. If this story moved you the way living it moved me, I ask you to please hit that like button, because it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear that decency still exists and that it matters. Subscribe if you want more true stories told with honesty and heart, because I have more to share, and I will keep sharing them for as long as you're here to listen. And please, leave your thoughts in the comments section. Tell me what this story brought up for you. Tell me if you have ever been someone's open door, or if someone has been yours. Those are the stories I want to read. I'll see you all in the next one.